you ever played a game and then once you finish it, you have a ton of thoughts, but you can't remember how you felt during the beginning? I decided to write down my thoughts while playing the game in real time, so I'm writing this script as I play through it. I'm curious of how my thoughts and feelings will change during my time with each game, so I'm going to write my thoughts down at the 1 hour, 5 hour, 10 hour, 20 hour, and then the end of each game I complete in this series. The game we're playing this time is a classic, Dark Cloud 2 from the PS2. I've never played the second game in the series, but the first one is one of my favorite games from that generation of consoles. I'll end up comparing the two games to see which one is better in my opinion, but I'll try to remain open-minded the whole time. While writing down my thoughts and talking about this game, it's possible that there will be spoilers, so if you haven't played this one yet and don't want anything spoiled, I would consider coming back to this video once you've played the game. This will be my spoiler warning just in case though. If you're new here, consider subscribing to the channel for more content like this. If you've also played this game, let me know what your thoughts are in the comments below. I'm excited to start playing, so I'll check back in once I hit the 1 hour mark. After 1 hour of gameplay, we haven't gotten a bunch of information, but this game has already planted a bunch of seeds. The game opens up with a girl running away from some enemies as she attempts to reach her father's chambers. It looks like we're in some sort of castle, but I'm not entirely sure. Once she gets so far, she ends up surrounded by a bunch of enemies, but she's able to dodge and grab a sword, and then we get to actually control her and learn how the combat works in the game. I love the idea that I can pick up an enemy and throw them at other enemies. That made me really happy in this opening fight, even though it doesn't really do any damage. Once we beat these enemies, we get another cutscene where she enters her father's room to find him dead lying on the ground. There's another man that's standing over her father's body, and he sort of just looks and stares at her for a second, then he opens a portal and he leaves. It never tells us who the girl is or the man that killed her father, and it doesn't do anything else because now we get some narration from our main character, Max. It shows him running down a street during a storm. He seems like a mechanic of some sort and is able to fix stuff with a comically large wrench and screwdriver. The main thing we need to know here is that we got a ticket to the circus. Max falls asleep, but we're able to head to the circus where a child with red hair steals our ticket and we have to chase him down. We end up deciding that we're just gonna let the kid have our ticket and we'll just go the next time the circus is around. This triggers the redhead child to tell us that we passed and he vanishes, giving us our ticket back. We head to the show and we get a couple of cutscenes of the circus actually performing. One of those acts is where an elephant does a backflip, kicking a ball and then catching it after it bounces off a couple posts. This is insane. What in the hell? How did they teach this elephant how to do this? Anyway, during the show, we overhear a conversation between the mayor and Flotsam, the clown that runs the circus. We find out that Flotsam is looking for our gym, and he threatens the mayor as he's beating him up. We knock over a can, and this leads to Flotsam noticing the pendant we're wearing around our neck, and he sends a bunch of clowns after us. This cutscene's pretty long, but it's a good one. Eventually, we get surrounded by some clowns, and we have to use our wrench to fight. This converts the wrench into a battle wrench, and it's our first weapon for the game. This allows for us to escape for now, but Flotsam's chasing us down with this crazy jack-in-the-box mech thing. We get another really long cutscene before we're saved by a boy named Donnie that leads us into the sewers or the water channel. Donnie gives us a classic gun, and we decide that we're going to leave the town and see what's truly happening outside of it. None of the townspeople have left or seen the outside for a very long time. This ends the prologue of the game, and we start Chapter 1 and the first dungeon. This is where Dark Cloud 2 plays a lot like the first Dark Cloud game. When we enter the dungeon, we get to pick what floor level we go to, starting at 1 and moving up. We have to kill all the enemies on that floor, and find the key item so that we can finish whatever task it is that lets us get to the next floor. In the channel, we have to get the gate key to complete the floor. Pretty simple. If you don't know, Dark Cloud 2 is an action RPG where our weapons have durability, and we have to make sure we repair them or they'll break and we'll lose them forever. This game does not do that. They will break, but we can just repair them even if they're broken. Each enemy will drop ABS when we defeat them, and this will allow for us to upgrade and build our weapons to better ones, so killing enemies has a purpose in this game. That's about all we get at this point in the game, besides learning how to upgrade our weapons with things we collect in the dungeons, such as adding fire damage to our current wrench. Something new in this game is challenges for each floor that will grant us medals, which I haven't completed any yet, so I don't really know what we're supposed to do with them at this point, but they could be cool, I guess. Once we complete the first floor, we get a cutscene of Max at dinner with his family, and they have an argument about his mother, which is the main reason Max wants to leave the city. He wants to leave so he can track down his mother that has been gone for what seems like a very long time. Then the last thing that happens before reaching the 1 hour mark is that Max doesn't even remember what his mother's face looks like anymore, which means that she's probably been gone for a long time. That gets us to the 1 hour in the game, and the story so far seems pretty good. It has questions stacked on top of each other with no answers, but it's caught my attention, so I want to play more of it. The combat feels pretty smooth, especially the range fighting, and I like the process of upgrading our weapons much more in this game compared to the first one. We haven't done anything with town building yet. The first game gives this to you almost immediately, so I hope that happens soon. I'm liking the game so far, and it makes me want to play more and see what new things we can get throughout the adventure, so I'll definitely be playing more of this. I'll check back in at the 5 hour mark and see how I'm feeling then. After reaching the 5 hour mark, I have a bunch of mixed feelings about this game. I find myself continuing to compare this game to the first one, and it's almost completely different besides some of the combat and the enemies. I've completed the underground water channel dungeon, clearing out 2 bosses in the area and unlocking a robot that we can switch into during combat, making the enemies extremely easy to deal with. I have a big feeling that Steve the Robot is going to make this game so much easier in the future, because right now, enemies still pick me apart. Early in the first dungeon, we're given a camera from Cedric, and with this camera we can go around different areas of the world and take pictures of objects. These objects will become ideas, and then we can merge 3 of them together to invent an item. This is like crafting, think of it that way. It's a pretty cool system because you can potentially get some good items and weapons from them, and some seem to come a bit early, so they're overpowered. There are books and notes around the world that will tell us how to invent these things, like what 3 ideas we need to combine. We actually have to beat the elephant that did the backflip as the middle dungeon boss, which this ended up just being a couple hits from Steve, and that was completed. Then we finished the final boss of the dungeon, which I'll avoid any spoilers for that section, but it was a rather simple fight once you figure out the timing. Once we leave the underground water channel, we come out to the old train station, and Cedric is there telling us that we need to take the train and travel the world to find out the truth. Once on the train, we're attacked by Flotsam again, but this time he's in this buggy thing with a mounted gun, and he's using that mounted gun, and he's just laying into the train. Our only option is to throw down bombs at him, but they bounce, so we need to pick the right angle and distance for each throw. Not that bad of a fight, but I screwed up a couple times taking more damage than I wanted to. This leads into meeting our next playable character, Monica. I'll leave all the story points out of this for anyone that hasn't played the game and wants to, but basically she's tasked with helping us take down the vampire-like dude at the beginning of the game we seen, Emperor Griffin. At least I think that's who that is. There is a lot of story-related stuff concerning that, but we arrive in the brand new area called Cystane, because there are boulders blocking the path for us to advance any further on train. This leads into what will become the city, but as for now, there's a singular house with a few dwarfs. These dwarfs have the power to add, remove, and rearrange things in the area, so we really need to ask them a favor. This is the part that's similar to the first game, but extremely complicated for no reason. In the first game, we went into a dungeon, found parts to complete the city, then we would come back out, build the houses, meet the people, get story-related stuff, but for the most part, we could design the city parts and then build them how we wanted, unless we wanted everyone to be happy. In this game, it's building parts and then placing them, but they're empty. And then you add decorations to fulfill the town's needs so that someone in the future might move in. It seems like there's an unnecessary amount of steps to this so far. It's not very enjoyable, and that's one of the things I loved about the first game. So we'll see how this goes in the future. We unlocked a new dungeon called the Rainbow Butterfly Wood, and we have to make our way through there, trying to find someone for the dwarves. These 4 that I've completed thus far are way more difficult than the first dungeon, and if I didn't have Steve fully fueled up when going into each floor, I basically don't stand a chance. This dungeon also added seals for some of the level, making it so that we can only use one character or we won't be able to heal, making some of the levels very difficult. For this dungeon, we have to find a soul to advance to the next floor, and then we cut a tree down before moving on. I took the time to go back and get all the available ideas up to this point in the game, and that took a while. So I haven't really done much since then. I'm enjoying the game still, but this one is much more challenging than the first game, and the town building is a huge letdown so far. But I'll check back in at the 10-hour mark and see how I'm feeling then. I've gotten to the 10-hour mark, and the first thing to mention is that the building in the city is much better than I expected. I still don't like it as much as the first game, but once I figured out how it worked, it's pretty good. We still have to achieve specific requirements for the villagers, but we actually unlock the ability to bring people from Palm Brinks with us on the train, and then letting them move into the new village. The requirements are pretty simple, like decorating the city and letting them move into an actual house and not a straw house. It's stuff like that so far, so it's still nothing too bad when it comes to requests, but this at least makes the village turn out a certain way. I got 100% for this city and got a special item for doing so I think it's worth it in the end. We unlock the ability to move into the future and then come back, and this is all due to story elements. Based on how we build up the city in present day, it affects the city in the future. This will give us new shops and characters to interact with in the future, which we can get new items from. I really like that part of it. I think that's all for the city building side of the game, and like I said, I enjoy it more than I expected, but I still like Dark Cloud's building much better. We completed the second dungeon, at least what we can for now, and got to the final boss. I think this boss is pretty easy if you listen to the hint the game gives you, so I can't really complain about this one. I have most of the invention ideas except for the few that are missable because I didn't know that they were a thing at the time. That's super annoying. We recruited all the available characters besides one, and that's because we gained the ability to fish, and I needed to upgrade the fishing pole so that I could catch bigger ones to appease his request. This ends up being more of a grinding thing, but it'll be easy. This game loves grinding. So far I had to grind for gold, material, weapon upgrades, just so I could recruit characters. That's not even for the main story stuff. It's just pointless grinding. No wonder why this game takes like 60 hours to complete. I also upgraded Steve. He has better defense now, a better core. He can talk, which is extremely annoying because he has just a few lines that he repeats over and over again. We got an arm cannon weapon, which is 1,000 times better than melee fighting. So I've been cruising through some of these dungeon levels now. And I think I'm about to move into chapter 3 because we got the boulders out of the way of the train, meaning we can move to the next area. We also unlocked the ability for Monica to transform into monsters, which is interesting, but seems kind of pointless. This keeps that enemy type from attacking us and we can actually talk to them. It was needed for part of the story, but I don't know how useful it would be in the future. I think the story is still pretty good as of right now, and we're learning a bit more about Emperor Griffin. I don't really have much more to talk about in the way of game mechanics or story, but I do want to talk about a few things that are kind of annoying to me. With Steve being so strong, what's the point of leveling up my main characters? Like, I basically one-shot enemies with Steve and he continues to get stronger. All characters that we recruit can be our partners, but some of their abilities are completely useless in my opinion, especially the cosmetic ones. Does any of these clothing items benefit us in any way? Because if it does, it doesn't tell us that. It seems like busy work as of right now, but maybe I need them at some point in the story. Anyways, I'm more into the game now than I was at the 5-hour mark, so I'm curious how I'll feel once I hit 20 hours. And when I do, I'll check back then. After playing for 20 hours, I can honestly say that I'm fully invested in the game now. I think the story is a bit weak considering the use of time travel, but it's doing enough to keep my attention. I completed chapter 2 and 3 and got 100% of the cities built, giving us special items, and I just have to finish the dungeon in chapter 4. And then I'll have that city completely done as well. I've continued to upgrade Steve, our ride pod, and I have a bunch of new parts for him. I have some rollerblades that allow us to move faster, a better version of the arm cannon, I've upgraded his defense a few times, and the core is maxed out, and I actually got a trophy for it. I still use our ride pod more than our actual characters, but if you kill an enemy and then switch back to the human character, then you get the ABS points, and we can level up our weapons this way. making it a lot easier to grind. It's a bit annoying to do that, but most enemies just take way too long to deal with our human characters. I think I'm gonna need to actually grind out some weapon levels and build them up, because I almost never use my wrench or swords because they don't do anything to the enemies. We unlocked fishing contests at Palm Brinks, which seems rigged or something because I thought I did well with the fish I turned in, but I ended up finishing in like 5th place or something, and the winner had to over double my score. Or am I supposed to find fish that are that crazy? Especially when you can only turn 10 fish in and they pick the best 3. The fishing contest takes over Town Hall, and this has its own design in the area, which I really like, but this doesn't seem like something I'll really mess with in the future. During Chapter 3, we're introduced to Spida. It's golf. We have to hit these balls that fell into this world from a different timeline back into the portal in a set amount of hits. We can get new clubs that make things easier, and we can even add backspin and rotation to the orb. I wasn't ever able to get this to work though, so maybe I just didn't understand it. These show up after defeating all the enemies on any specific floor of a dungeon, and honestly they could be worth it because we got some really rare items from them. We recruited a few more characters, and I think I only have 2 or 3 left to add to the train. We've been leaving them in specific cities for requests, so I have way less now on the train than I potentially could. I still only use the same 3 characters as added party members: Cedric for healing our ride pod, Eric for the improved bombs that can get us out of a pinch, and Donnie because he opens locked chests that are in the dungeons, and we don't have to risk getting poisoned, or it exploding, or our weapon strength going all the way down to 0. Plus, I think the chests give us better weapons and items since we don't force the chest open. Outside of those few things, the game follows the same pattern: go to a new area, help a person in need, clear the dungeon, fight the boss, restore the city in the future, move to the next place. I like it, but it's just doing the same thing over and over again, in a different environment. Chapter 3 takes place in a canyon with 4 platforms that we can build stuff on, but they need to stay the same heights, so we can't put everything on just one of them, and we have to balance it out. Then Chapter 4 takes place on a beach, and we have to build pier parts to place down buildings and objects. I've collected a bunch of ideas at this point from taking pictures, and we thought up over 65 inventions, which with the right materials, I could craft them at any point. I'm still really enjoying my time with the game, and my main goal right now is to build up weapons to see what I can turn them into. And I might actually be able to use my main characters in a dungeon for once. But I guess we'll see. I'll check back in once I complete the game. I don't know how long that will take, but I'll see you then, give my final thoughts, and a little mini review of it. I've completed Dark Cloud 2 in around 42 hours of gameplay, 41 and a half to be exact. I had 107 medals from the dungeons, and I had 1 weapon at its final form, the Supernova gun, which made the back end of this game so much easier to deal with. I collected almost all the photos in the game, I think, besides some of the enemy scoops, made every invention I was able to create, and maxed out both the core and defense of my ride pod. And after all that, I see no reason to ever use Monica's monster transformation. I feel like they don't level quick enough, and collecting the badges feels like an unnecessary layer to the gameplay. You honestly just didn't need to add this at all. Just have Monica as another character, or let her share the ride pod. The monster transformation only had 1 story involvement, and the rest is if you wanted to go for medals. I guess I just don't see the point in it. The story is decent in this, but I've just never been a fan of time travel. In games, in movies, in anything really. I'm still hoping that one day I'll find a game that I like it in. Maybe when I play Chrono Trigger for the first time, it might be that one. Anyways, I enjoyed most of the other story parts. The cutscenes were good and the ending was fine. My only real issue, and it's not really an issue, it's just sort of interesting, is the random boss rush that we get at the end of the game. Why? It's so out of place. Now let's compare Dark Cloud and Dark Cloud 2. The story in the second game feels more polished and had some actual thought and care put into it. Plus it had voice acting, so I'll give the edge to Dark Cloud 2 for the story. The combat and dungeons are basically the same besides the addition of the ride pod and the monster transformation, but the weapons and projectiles feel the same from each game other than they're split in the first game to specific characters. I think I prefer to have more than just 2 characters, but overall pretty indifferent to the idea, as long as it works for the story. That being said, I would say the combat is a tie, since it wasn't changed all that much from the first to the second game. It's nice of them to allow us to break our weapons in Dark Cloud 2 and not lose them, but it sort of gives the game meaning when you could potentially lose your best weapon. Not having to worry about it makes the game easier, but I think it's more realistic that when we're fighting through dungeons, that our weapons would actually fully break, and that we would need to drink water. It's just small details that make more sense when we're in the dungeon. So I'll give the edge for that to the first game. The city building was the big deal breaker for me in the early hours of this one, but I didn't end up liking it. I just have a few issues with it. Why doesn't anyone ever leave their house in this game? In the first one, people left and walked around. In this one, nobody walks around, and it just makes the cities feel dead. We can customize more in this game over the first one, but the first game made it feel like we were actually bringing people back to the normal world. I don't really know what else to say about that specifically, it just feels better in the first game. To compare the final bosses, the first game was way more difficult to deal with because it required us to actually use our allies. In Dark Cloud 2, I soloed the whole final boss rush with Max and his ride pod, meaning that I sort of just stopped using Monica because I didn't feel like I ever needed to. We could break seals on floors that we were forced to use her and just use Max instead. So I basically completed the game with Max. This could be for better or worse depending on the type of person you are when playing games like these. I think that's about all I have to say about this game. I enjoyed it, but it didn't blow me away or anything. So if I had to put this on a scale from 1 to 10, I think I would get it like a 7.5. I enjoyed my time with it. The final dungeon felt extremely long, but I never got bored of the game, where I didn't want to actually pick it up and play it anymore. There is a chapter after completing the final boss with a post-game dungeon and boss fights, but after going through a bunch of floors for a couple hours, I hit a point where I was ready to just hang this one up. Well, that's been my thoughts throughout my playthrough of Dark Cloud 2. I hope that you enjoyed this video and how my thoughts of the game changed over the span of playing it. I'd love to know your thoughts about this and hear some different opinions, so let me know down in the comments. If you want to see more content like this, let me know what other JRPGs you would want me to check out. Remember to like this video because it helps out my channel, and if you haven't already, click the subscribe button for more JRPG content, and as always, I'll see you in the next one.